I welcome you to this report launch on climate-induced migration among women, stories from Muzaffargarh and Tharparkar districts of Pakistan. I'm Aisha Ilyas and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Before we proceed further, let me take you through the housekeeping rules quickly. So, speakers are requested to keep their microphones off when they are not speaking to ensure good audio quality for everyone. You're also encouraged to switch on your cameras, especially when you are speaking, if your network allows to do that without any disruptions. The seminar will be recorded and the video will be posted online. You're welcome to revisit the discussion later and feel free to share it with your network. We also invite questions from our audience and colleagues at the end or as the session goes. Please feel free to write them in the chat box or on the Q&A box on the right side. Please have the chat box open in the window as well, or you can also indicate that you want to speak by clicking the raise hand tab on the right side of the chat window. The session will also be telecasted live on SDPI's Facebook page. For those watching us on Facebook Live, please write your questions in the chat there. They will be conveyed to the speakers through our team. Our panelists for today's session are Ms. Zartaj Gul Wazir. She'll be joining us shortly, Minister of State for Climate Change, Government of Pakistan. Mr. Sanjay Vahish, Director, Climate Action Network in South Asia, or CANSA. Ms. Maria Ross, Regional Portfolio Manager, Silk Routes at International Center for Migration Policy Development, ICMPD. Ms. Rana Rahim, Head ICMPD Pakistan. And Dr. Abid Qayyum Saleri, Executive Director of Sustainable Development Policy Institute. Ms. Mariam Shabir Abbasi, environmentalist at SDPI and also the author of this report. Mr. Danish Hassan Ansari, visiting researcher at SDPI and lecturer at Ikra University. And Ms. Khansa Naeem, Project Assistant at SDPI, will be giving a technical presentation. Thank you for joining us today. I'd request Dr. Abid Saleri to formally begin the proceedings with his welcome remarks.
Thank you, Aisha. First of all, let me extend my warm gratitude for all the distinguished panelists and speakers for joining us today, and my appreciation for the STPI research team led by Ms. Mariam Shabir Abbasi for this very important work, which is, I think, first of its kind in Pakistan, climate-induced migration. And not only climate-induced migration, but the gendered aspect of climate-induced migration, how it affects the women. I think I can see Minister of State Zartaj Gul Saiba on my screen as well. Let me welcome Ms. Zartaj Gul, who is Minister of State for Climate Change, member of Federal Cabinet and elected member of Parliament of Pakistan. Welcome, Ms. Gul. Coming back to the topic today, this fieldwork was actually conducted before COVID. And I would say that whatever its recommendation and findings are, perhaps those are now more exacerbated due to the effect of COVID. But the trends, they still remain the same, that we need to understand the migration, climate-induced migration thoroughly. We need to think of some consensus building on some of the terminology and some of the definitions that we use, especially in a country like Pakistan or in a country like India or Bangladesh, the huge countries where some at times internal displacement, it can be as chaotic and as disruptive as international migration is. So we need to think of how we can bring this internal migration and climate-induced internal migration in our mainstream policy discourse. Amidst COVID, we also need to think of, while we're talking of social safety mechanism and we are talking of different fiscal stimulus, we also need to think that how we are taking care of people who are getting displaced due to climate change, and especially the women who are getting displaced due to climate change. In Pakistan, we had a record fiscal stimulus whereby government of Pakistan, they provided direct cash transfer to 15 million households. Now, improving the filter of approaching those target beneficiaries, if we can also include the climate-induced migrants in it, and if we can also include the women-led households which have to somehow leave their places due to climate, either due to temperature or drought or floods. So we need to bring them under the coverage of social protection and social safety nets. I'm also grateful for the support by ICMPD and the European Union to carry out this research. And I welcome the speakers from ICMPD, especially Ms. Maria Ross, Ms. Rana Rahim. I also welcome Mr. Sanjay Vashist, who is the regional coordinator of Climate Action Network South Asia. CAN, of course, has been an important partner in different climate change-related researches that STPI has been conducting so far. We also need to somehow rethink of expanding the scope of such studies from national to regional and regional to international level. But as I said, at first thing first, we need to agree on a definition of migrants who are getting migrated due to climate-induced migration. And also making use of Ms. Rana Rahim's presence here, I would also like to flag another issue that ICMPD perhaps may like to look into detail, and that is in the context of Pakistan, where remittances have increased manifold, and that is, of course, contradictory to the prediction of the assessment of World Bank, which has warned of a 20% reduction in remittances the world over. In Pakistan, the remittances have increased, and we need to come up with an objective study to find out that whether this increase in remittances is due to the fact that Pakistan is receiving more remittances from its overseas diaspora, or it is due to the fact that during a pandemic, many households from abroad they shifted to Pakistan on a permanent basis, either due to layoffs or due to the fact that people, they were not finding it safe keeping their families with them. So they sent their families back home, and that's why the remittances, those are increasing. So perhaps some sort of research around remittances, around migration, that would help the policy around on remittances, as well as the policy on migrant families. While Minister would be joining us, I can reassure the ICMPD colleagues, the KENSA colleagues, that in my capacity as a member Economic Advisory Council, Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, I'll try my level best to bridge research policy gap and take the policy recommendations of this research study at the highest forum where it can be discussed, and its recommendations can be taken up both by the decision makers as well as by the Parliament. Only last night we had a very successful event where we had invited more than 40 parliamentarians across political spectrum, and we shared the recommendation of this research study with them, and also requested them to not only do legislation around these recommendations, but also as their role in various parliamentary standing committees. We requested them to invite and ask the relevant departments of the government to come and brief the honorable parliamentarians on some of the issues which would be raised by the research team. So I look forward to our future collaboration with ICMPD and with the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Slurry, for your very concise welcome remarks, the brief overview of the situation, and very well-crafted suggestions. I request Ms. Mariam Shabir, Mr. Danish Hassan, and Ms. Khansa Naeem to present the report.
Thank you, Aisha. Okay, I'm taking start with the introduction. Climate change has triggered the existing poverty disproportionately impacting both men and women. The impact of climate change varies across gender as being influenced by societal structures. The uniform impact of disasters has never been observed. The literature reveals that climate vulnerabilities are more frequently observed in poor marginalized groups, for instance, women, due to their weak social status and weak adaptive capacity are more severely affected by the climate extremes. Climate affected women migrate at the cost of their privacy. As migration increases the risk of sexual violence, due to this reason, safe shelter is the prime concern of migrated women. The evidence shows that due to security concerns, women suffer from anxiety and post-traumatic stress. Based on extensive literature review, we have selected two districts. The first one is Tharparkar from Sindh province, and the second is district Muzaffargarh from Punjab province of Pakistan. And these both districts have repetitive episodes of floods and droughts. We have used qualitative research method. Data was collected from both urban and rural area of both districts before COVID. At least 10 FGDs from each urban and rural area of both the districts were carried out. Each FGD contained 15 to 20 disaster-affected women of age group 20 to 50 years. The total number of female migrants from district Muzaffargarh were 91, and the total number of female migrants from district Tharparkar were 129. This map is showing our study sites from both districts. In district Tharparkar, our areas were Kundri, Bihari, Bajir, Sangar, Kundri, Mirch Mandi, while in district Muzaffargarh, our urban area were Mohalla, P. Bukhariwala, Talkot, Taleri, and on rural side, we have covered Ajabarain. We have found out three types of migration under this study. The first one is permanent migration, the second is temporary migration, and the last one is seasonal migration. In case of permanent migration, women migrate permanently along with their family from original area of residence to destination area. In Muzaffargarh district, most of women were involved in the permanent migration after 2010 floods. While in Tharparkar, women migrated permanently to urban areas. In case of temporary migration, migrants of both sides, after staying at different locations, return to their original area of residence. This is observed as most repetitive trend. In Muzaffargarh district, migrants stayed at mosques, shrines, schools, and sometimes at raised piece of land, which they called Tiba in their local language. They stayed there from 15 to 3 months, 15 days to 3 months. In Tharparkar, migrants stayed at different locations near their original area of residence. And when it comes to seasonal migration, in Tharparkar and Muzaffargarh, it occurred from March to June. Migrants move to near one urban sites where they find some temporary work. And then for the remaining period of year, they live in the original, in their native areas and engaged in agriculture activities. This figure is showing different types of driver, which are considered by disaster-affected women and family before making decisions. And these drivers include political drivers, social, economic, environmental, and demographic drivers. Along with these drivers, personal characteristics like education, marital status, gender, and challenges and sports like cost of moving, skills, and social safety network. These were also taken into consideration for making decision of migration. Thank you. That's all from my side. For result, I would request Ms. Mariam Shabir to proceed presentation further.
Thank you, Khansa, for setting the stage for me. I'll move on to further results and discussions. Yes. So first area is related to women and health. Health is area which is women is most affected when it comes to climate-induced migration. In Tharparkar, of course, as Khansa told that it was drought, and in Muzaffargarh it was floods. So I will share a bit of stories before sharing stats. This one is from Raju. She is 34 years old from Sangarh, Tharparkar, Sindh. And she told in her native language, of course, and we translated through our enumerators because Sindhi is the local language over there, which was a challenge for us to understand. And she says, I was 7 months pregnant when we migrated due to drought in our village, Sangarh. We migrated on camel and worked as labor to lift weight, and as a result, lost my infant. My family took a loan of 10,000 RS, and at that time, its USD cost is $95.2 from the landowner for meeting my health expenses. I went into depression after losing my baby. So depression is one of the health impact. Second is, of course, losing baby. And nutritional deficiencies are also observed in Tharparkar. Next slide, please. This table is showing situation of food, water, and health facilities in Tharparkar. And as Khansa told that we reached out to urban and rural migrants in both study sites. And in Tharparkar, they told that migrant women told that the situation of food, water, and health was not better even in urban areas for them. And you must be thinking that what might be the reason for that. In urban areas, basically facilities of hospitals are there, but since most of the migrants are poor, they cannot afford those facilities, therefore cannot avail those abilities as avail those facilities as well. So 82.2 rural migrants told that health was worst, and it is because of the poverty and lack of resources to avail that. And 86.6% rural migrant told that the water situation was worst for them. And 56% also told in urban area that this situation was worse. In my next slide, I will be telling that what exactly is the situation of water in those districts. Moving on to this slide, this one is from Muzaffargarh. So Kosar, which is 23 years old, she narrated that during floods, I was 4 months pregnant. I got sick due to malnutrition and was referred to a city hospital for treatment. I also had other kids at that time and would give them muddy water by mixing sugar in to feed them as a replacement of milk. I used to eat leftover food from the temporary place where we were staying at. So Kosar was one of the a migrant which fall under category of temporary migration, which Khansa told in her previous slides. And she was also 4 months pregnant when flood hit her area. And of course, she also had other kids, and she didn't have proper food and supplements to give to her kids at that time. Next slide, please. This is the situation of food, water, and health in Muzaffargarh. You would be surprised to see that 100% rural women even said that it was the worst situation of health in rural areas even as well, because of the same reason. They didn't have access to food, to health facilities due to poverty or lack of resources, or access as well, because due to floods, road infrastructure is damaged in Muzaffargarh every time, and they do not have anything to commute to those areas to avail health facilities. And 100% told that the food situation was worse. These were those, and 60% worse in urban areas and 100% in rural areas. These are those migrants who were staying temporarily at some locations, either in shrines, mosques, or schools even. Those migrants who stayed at schools and were handled by our institutes like army, they were a bit organized, and they had bit better facilities, but rest of them didn't have really good facilities to avail during migration and during disasters. Next slide, please. Now, this is the disease data, and of course, in Muzaffargarh and Tharparkar, these are not the only diseases which they get during floods and droughts, but this is the list of the women who gave us this list that they face these issues, like in Muzaffargarh, it was pneumonia, anemia, diarrhea, hepatitis, skin diseases, and other allergies. One of the common thing which they forgot to mention, I believe, and which we find out in literature as well during floods, snake bite is also very common. which almost every second, third person face that issue. And in Tharparkar, it was fever, malaria, diarrhea, hepatitis, skin diseases, and other allergies. Next slide, please. Now, second outcome is the social roles and responsibility. And I'll quote in the form of story as well. This is a picture of Dimi, who is 45 years old, and she's from Maluk Meher Tharparkar, Sindh, Pakistan. She stated that when we had to migrate due to drought, my husband got sick. At that time, I had no money for his treatment, so I had to took 15,000, which is $142.8 of loan. In order to repay the loan, I had no work at a kiln for 4 years, where I was paid Rs 400 per 1,000 bricks. So this story tells that due to their vulnerabilities and lack of skills, they migrate from one location to another location and avail whatever job they get, despite having not that skill. So 15,000 is very minimal amount, $142. It is very minimal amount, and to repay that amount, which she took for the treatment of her husband, she had to work at a brick kiln for 4 years. And when she came back to her original area of residence after so many years, her original house was damaged. So she took loan again to rebuild that little hut, and she was paying loan in the form of working on the field of the landlord in the original area of residence. So this is during migration, they have roles and responsibilities, and they help in agriculture activities, they help in taking care of kids. So their burden is added with this issue of migration. Next slide, please. This is another story from Tharparkar, and of course, we haven't disclosed identity due to the consent not given to us. One of the women told that when we migrated to Shahdadpur, which is a village in Tharparkar, I left the children in the hut and departed for harvesting wheat. Meanwhile, the children were playing outside when a motorcyclist hit one of them and injured them. We borrowed money for his treatment from the landlord. So this is the burden of responsibilities that a woman went out to harvest wheat, and she was having a little kid from his age, I can recall, was between 3 to 5 years. And he was playing outside his home and he was hit by a motorbike. So this is kind of, day-to-day tensions they face. And climate change also affects, of course, soil fertility in those areas. And one of the women told that our cultivated land destroyed after drought. This is another tension they have to face due to climate change and droughts in those areas. A piece of land from which we used to get 50 months of pearl millet, cowpea, green gram before drought, has now reduced to 20 months. This is how the fertility of land due to droughts in those areas has affected, and the productivity has declined. We do not cultivate our land as we don't have the knowledge to make the barren land fertile. We are not sure whether seeds will grow or not after getting soil fertility. So that's where I think they need training, that how by adopting simple practices, they can, improve soil fertility in those areas. But with the passage of time, of course, that will decline also. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So third intervention is women and decision making. In most of the area, backside please, in most of the area, women most of the women were not educated. And Khansa, please, previous slide. Yeah. So most of the women were not educated. 100% was the illiteracy rate in Tharparkar. And when I'm saying that 100% illiteracy rate, I don't mean that in Tharparkar literacy rate is 0. I'm referring to the group of women we have contacted. I'm only referring to respondents. So one of the women told that we had to sell the seeds which we had during drought at a very low rate of Rs 1,000 due to illness and shortage of money. Later, we bought the seat at Rs 4,000. So she was narrating her experience that how her husband made them to sell their own seed at cost of 1,000 at the time of illness because they needed money for the treatment, and later on they had to buy seed, borrow seed actually with 3 times more cost, which was very expensive. Soon after migrating here, this is story from Muzaffargarh. We even sold flowers on the day of Eid, which is holy festival of Muslims, because we had no money to celebrate Eid. So this is one of the difficulty which women face. But they, this family decided that they won't be living inside walls, but they will step out even during very important festivity and will earn something so that their family can eat. Next slide, please. And this story was of Sumbul. Sumbul's maternal uncle supported their stay when they migrated. And after 1 year, her mother got the job of a lady health worker after training. And I think her aunt helped her to get that job. And Sumbul completed her studies at her own by extending private tuition to children at home. After her graduation, she launched a startup, a stitching school, with the help of Benazir Income Support Program, which is BIS program in Pakistan. When the business flourished, the sister of the local member of National Assembly (MNA) took control of the startup, misusing powers of her brother. Sumbul had to step back because she was not so powerful. So this was one of the positive story which we got from Muzaffargarh, that these were all sisters, three sisters, and one mother, and mother got job after 1 year of training, and she completed her education, and she also started a startup, Sumbul. She took they took decision. So what I'm trying to say that if women is given power of decision making, they can really make a difference for their family. But unfortunately, Sumbul, which she started a startup, was when she started getting money from that, it was taken back by the misuse of the power over there. And she said it came as a shock when her startup was taken back. I fail to understand that how someone can snatch your hard work simply because they are powerful and I am weak. She never thought of another startup, which was very, of course, disheartening. Now she is doing a private job at a multinational to support her younger sister. And she, of course, she was one of the enumerator in our service as well. She is also part-time doing those jobs as well in supporting field works in Muzaffargarh with different NGOs as well. Next slide, please. Next come women and education. As I told earlier, that education was very, very low among the respondents over here in Muzaffargarh and in Tharparkar, of course. And I'm here quoting 2 respondent scores. After the 2010 floods, this is story from Muzaffargarh, of course, we moved to city Mohalla Bukhariwala with the help of our relatives. Everything, including result cards of kids, got lost during floods. The school is away from here. Girls stay at home because we cannot bear the expenses of school van. However, boys go to school on bicycle. So whenever they have to make choice between girl education and boy education, families over there prefer boys to go to school instead of girls because they think that male is the head of the family in the future. So to meet the expenses, they prefer boys for education. And that's how girls suffer. The most stressful impact of climate-induced disasters can be seen on our children's education. The unavailability of teachers has ruined the school infrastructure, and no access to routes has suppressed their desire for education, which is their basic right also. So during floods, of course, the infrastructure is damaged, and it also involves schools as well. And they suffer at the hands of disasters. Next slide, please. Another respondent told that it was my last year of high school and I was supposed to appear in board exams. And this was story from Muzaffargarh again. Suddenly floods inundated the area. We lost everything, including our house, fields and livestock. When we settled back, my parents arranged my marriage. Had the situation being normal, I could have done my graduation to go for a better future. So this, when this girl was talking, because she didn't give consent to share her picture or name, so I could have shared here, but when I was interviewing her, she was very, very sad, and that sadness can be seen in her eyes because she lost the chance to get higher education because of the floods. And parents decided to marry her because of the several reasons. One is resources, of course, it's expensive. Second is schools were far away and they had to prefer boys. And third is, of course, this fear of losing kids and parents. In that fear, parents also decide that, you know, girls should settle somewhere with their husbands and with their family, and whenever they met with another disasters and flood in the future. And in Tharparkar district, girls do not have access to school in most of the cases. And most of the respondents were seasonal migrants. They don't stay at one location, they keep migrating one location to another location. Therefore, their education is suffered, and they don't, and they didn't, of course, have resources as well to really get education. Next slide, please. Another major issue is women and safety, especially during floods. Privacy of women is greatly compromised. In Muzaffargarh, one of the respondents told that floods and droughts made us vulnerable in all possible aspects. We had so many challenges to face, but the worst part was that we had no privacy during our temporary stay at various locations. Many people who apparently helped us later raped our daughters. This happened in Muzaffargarh, and unfortunately, people who came for the help, they mixed some of the medicines in edibles, and when they were subconscious, girls were there were instances of rapes as well, and there were some cases of children's abduction as well during floods. Next slide, please. This is the table showing situation of shelter, because safety is, of course, directly related to shelter during disasters. In urban area, 82.5% women told that the shelter was worst. And as I stated earlier, that those headed by, who stayed in the schools were a bit better, but those who stayed at shrines or under naked sky, they were more vulnerable. And in rural areas, 70% said that the shelter was, worst, and they did not have even basic facilities during their temporary stay at various locations. Next slide, please. This is the situation of Tharparkar District, in which urban migrant women told that 69.56% shelter were worst. However, 30% told that those were better, and 88.89% rural women told that shelters were worst, and this is because of the lack of resources. And in Tharparkar, they had to, of course, travel either by foot or on camels. And during that migration period, their animals also died, which is their prime source of livelihood in Tharparkar. Next slide, please. Now comes women in water. You know, too much water in Muzaffargarh due to floods and too little water due to drought in Tharparkar, both are, problematic. In Tharparkar, 79% of women told that they had to drink brackish water. And under even normal circumstances in Tharparkar, there is issue of water availability, and it is brackish water, of course. And it is unfit for drinking, but they are drinking because they don't have any other option. During FGDs conducted with women, it was revealed that communities are consuming brackish water, of course, and that has a level of arsenic and fluoride. This, of course, we took from the literature, where another researcher cited that there is this issue of arsenic and fluoride, which affects bones, joints, and dental problems of women and men equally. Water unavailability also causes problems for agriculture, of course. Monsoon is the peak season to harvest in Tharparkar, where agriculture is highly dependent on monsoon rain. Since women and men lack capacities to store water, they do not have really have resources and training and capacity to store water whenever there is little rain in those areas. Therefore, their crops are damaged due to droughts in the area. Next slide, please. Now, this is the situation, water and sanitation are interrelated. So this is the situation of sanitation in district Muzaffargarh during floods. Women who were not staying at schools because schools had washrooms, but in other case, they have to go for open defecation, which of course impacted their health. Their, of course, their privacy was compromised. and only 22% women said that the situation of sanitation was better. Whereas I think this 8 is missing in below table. 20% were said it was worse, but 80% were satisfied, and those 80% were those who stayed at either shrines or in the schools, having a facility of, and they were either supported by their some relatives after migration. Next slide, please. Next slide must be covering situation of sanitation.
Mayam, we are unable to hear you. Adnan, can you check what's the problem with her mic?
जी मरियम, please unmute कीजिए.
Sorry, I lost internet connection, so I had to. Yes, this is now full screen. So I was telling the situation of Tharparkar District, which is 88.89% respondent told that the sanitation situation was worst, and 21.74% told that situation was better. And this is, I believe, data from rural area. Next slide, please. May I request for the next slide, please? Yes, so I can't really see. Yes, now it is in bigger. So in our methodology, we used problem tree analysis with female groups we reached. So this is problem tree analysis from Muzaffargarh, Punjab. You can see that roots are giving direct and indirect links, which has some impacts on the above areas of tree. And those are, of course, impacts. So this is migration tree from the group we contacted in Muzaffargarh. As you can see that no availability of water is one of the cause to migrate, and no availability of water means more either more rainfall in the form of floods. Even in that case, water is not available to drink, and it causes muddy water. Then floods, of course, is another cause, and no education means long distance, schools damaged due to floods, and lack of resources, which is poverty. So you can see a lot of reasons directly and indirectly connected to the decision of migration. Which you can see in the above areas of tree. I think this is a bit technical, so I would leave this and move on to next slide, which is, of course, again problem tree analysis from district Tharparkar. And this is also have direct and indirect linkages, which have some impact on the above areas of trees. And one of the impact, no access to food, which ultimately lead to malnutrition, sick children, pregnancy loss, depression. Then our shelter issues had privacy issues, added responsibilities, sickness, and water fetching. They had to travel long distances, and they have to ignore kids, and they get hurt. And then borrowing money is another, which leads to labor and conflict issues domestically. So these are some of the causes and impact of migration from Tharparkar district. Next slide, please. Now is the part of recommendation, and for that I would request Mr. Danish Hassan Ansari, who happens to my husband as well, to please.
Thank you very much, Mariam, for that very concise analysis. Can everybody hear me? Am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
Yes, Danish.
Okay. So I will be discussing the policy recommendations based on the research findings from these areas of Tharparkar and Muzaffargarh. Some of you might know that climate change officially is a national federal subject, whereas health and environment are provincial subjects. So our recommendations are at the local, national, and at the international level. So we will discuss them. I will discuss them one by one. So starting from the local policy recommendations, that what can happen, what must happen at the local level. In Tharparkar and Muzaffargarh districts, women should be imparted training on information technology so that they might access online platforms to sell their handmade products such as embroidered shirts and caps, traditional clothes, and offer online tailoring services. This, of course, has to do with their economic sustainability and economic empowerment, which obviously is not possible because of the lack of appropriate technology and access. Women of both areas have excellent skills in sewing, embroidery, and handmade products, but they lack market access, therefore earn very little and often paid less. This is important to make their economic condition better, and if they start contributing to the earnings, she will have a say in decision making. So, as was mentioned and discussed before, that it's a patriarchal society, and women have a very less contribution in decision making, or even no contribution in decision making. So economic empowerment through technology and access can also make them more, first of all, economically empowered, and they will then be more able to be part of the decision-making process in the household because they will be financially contributing. There is a need to launch awareness campaigns on climate change impact for the communities at grassroots level so that people can make arrangements what to do at the time of disasters. Obviously, people, especially in these remote areas, are not aware of the issue of climate change. So there is a need to establish a causal link between migration and climate change for these people. There is a further need to invest in the poor communities' adaptive capacities and resilience building so that they can fight the climatic events instead of roaming or migrating from one place to another. Next slide, please. May I have the next slide, please? The next slide, please.
It is actually next slide. I believe there is some delay at your end.
Okay, I'm seeing it right now. Okay. So, yes, pregnant women should also be provided food supplements. Under Sindh government ration scheme, food items were distributed among pregnant women. The scheme should be revived, and similar schemes should also be introduced by the Punjab government as well. As you all know that during climate-induced migrations, women in general are vulnerable to diseases and they are malnourished. Pregnant women are obviously more vulnerable. Most of the women in both districts are involved in agriculture, either as laborers or as small landholder farmers. Small landholders either have less production of crops or they get very low amount upon selling. Crop production can be increased by providing women farmers with trainings through district level agriculture extension. The low cost issue can be solved by removing middlemen whose involvement causes loss to farmers. So this obviously has to do with improving the productivity of these small lands. Women should be given chance in decision making. In most of the cases, head of family, which is the man, takes decision related to investments, agriculture, or mobility, as was discussed before. Institutions like National Commission on the Status of Women, the NCSW, should step in and start awareness sessions for both men and women to include women in decision making. Next slide, please. Now coming to the national level policy recommendations. Currently, linkages between climate change and migration displacements are missing from the government policies. There is a need to demonstrate this link in our national policies. In this regard, the scope of national climate change policy needs to be extended to climate-induced migration and related issues. We do have a national climate change policy, but the link between climate change and migration is not really visible in that policy, or it should be more precise. Moreover, the government should invest on the projects which can improve mobility between urban and rural areas. This will improve connectivity and will make mobility of women and men less painful during disasters. The National Disaster Management Authority, which is the NDMA, should develop a long-term plan which may overcome the impact of climate change communities during disasters. There is a need to devise plans and strategies to build community resilience. So now, as it is mentioned, at the national level, NDMA, the National Disaster Management Authority, is the prime institution for managing disasters. So obviously at the national level, the NDMA's role is also very important. Next slide, please. So there's also a need to improve early warning systems. Though an early warning system is in place in most of the areas, timely messages and information cannot be communicated to communities. Local methods such as announcement through mosques, SMS service, and radio should be used to inform people about floods. Information should readily be available in local languages at district, tehsil, and union council level. So as you all know, these are remote areas, so you cannot expect everybody to have, or even some people to have internet access, Wi-Fi, or very precise mobile service connections. So then the local methods of communication, they should be used to inform people about flooding, like mosques, radios, communicating to people in their own languages at the tehsil and union council level. Government should build community halls during climate change induced migrations are very vulnerable. They
I believe there is some sort of a disruption in your connection.
Yes, sorry, I think I lost the connection. So we were discussing that the local methods of communication should then be adopted for informing people about floods and disasters. After that, as you all know, as it was discussed before, that women are very vulnerable during climate-induced migrations and disasters. Some of them are harassed, even raped. So it is the responsibility of the government to land camps where women are specially taken care of 24/7 so that they are safe from these kind of harassments. In view of the complaints of women harassment, the government should devise a long-term strategy for their protection during disasters. Though laws are in place, mechanisms to implement these laws is required. Next slide, please. So, women need sanitary pads during disasters. This special need is greatly ignored, which causes a lot of stress among them. Such topics are taboo in our society, which make women more vulnerable. Sanitary pads is a very taboo issue all over Pakistan, let alone in these remote areas. Women obviously they need these sanitary pads, but they are unable to communicate uh, this issue openly to a random person. And when they are unable to, they feel stressed, they go into depression, it leads to hygiene issues. So obviously such people should be in place with whom these women can communicate, and they should be sensitized about the issue. Moreover, women suffer from depression, trauma, and anxiety due to climate-induced disasters. NDMA and Ministry of National Health Services regulations and coordination should together devise a long-term health plan for women. Trauma counseling sessions should be organized after disasters to build their resilience. Apart from the physical damage caused by these disasters and migration, there is also a huge mental impact on the mental health of women. They have lost their homes. Some of their loved ones might have died as well. They are going to another place where God knows what happens to them. So mental health is also very important. Moreover, water should be provided door to door post disaster, as women have to travel long distances to fetch water. Ministry of Water Resources should devise a plan to provide water to the communities. During disasters, communities do not have access to drinking water, which makes them more vulnerable. Their livestock also die due to unavailability of water. Majority is dependent on agriculture and livestock at both the study sites. Areas prone to flooding in the Punjab should be declared non-residential areas, and communities should not be allowed to settle down along the Indus River. For that purpose, communities should be provided with land ownership to build their houses at safer places, which is a very important issue. People usually make settlements along the river banks because of the fertility of the land, but then these areas are also easily flooded during floods. So people must be communicated correctly that you cannot make settlements in these areas, and they should be allowed ownership in other areas so that they can easily move to safer areas. Next slide, please. Now, lastly, the recommendations at the international or regional level. South Asian countries are more vulnerable to climate change. Data pertaining to climate-induced migration should be organized, while agreements and learning should be shared between countries so that best practices might be implemented to build adaptive capacities for women. There is a need to build cooperation between countries to manage cross-border migration and protect the rights of international migrants. There is a need to share data between countries related to weather stations and water levels in shared rivers to improve early warning systems and protect communities from the devastating impact of flooding. This point is very important in the context of Pakistan and India, as we share rivers with each other. So if there is an impact on any river on the Indian side due to any change in weather condition, the impact will also be felt in Pakistan because it flows through India. So in this context, both countries should share information quite frequently so that people are well aware in advance that something is going to happen in the future. Lastly, internal institutions and organizations working on women and climate change should focus more on training and capacity building of women. Next slide, please. So now Ms. Mariam Shabir will give some concluding remarks of the report.
Thank you, Danish, for presenting some of the recommendations which were at local level, some at national and regional level, and some were at international level, keeping in view the severity of the issue at all levels. Now this study, coming to the conclusion, this ascertains multiple repercussions of climate change impacts on the rural and urban women, of course, as we presented a while ago. Loss of livelihoods due to frequent floods or droughts give rise to migration in multiple directions, which has both negative and positive outcomes. As I shared one of the story of Sumbul from Muzaffargarh, which had positive outcome in some of the cases, people get a chance to make their lives better, but in most of the cases, due to the unavailability of skills or lack of skills, I must say, and lack of resources, the impact counts negative. Owing to extreme weather events, women are affected differently as they do not have access to natural resources, doesn't own land. Of course, they don't have that much rights, and I'm talking again about respondents our study, have added roles, are unhealthy and poor, and do not have adaptive capacities which compel them to migrate. According to the study's finding, women along with family migrate due to environmental, social, economic, political, and demographic drivers, which my colleague just shared. The types of migration include temporary, permanent, and seasonal. And in case of Tharparkar, most of the migrations were, of course, seasonal. And in case of Muzaffargarh, when we particularly consider flood of 2010, most of the migration was permanent. Next slide, please. I think this is the limitation of technology, that it delays a few seconds when we want to change our slide. And this was all from our team. For contact, we may be reached at mariam@stpi.org. And we have answered some of the questions, and more can be posted in the chat box. And now I would hand over the discussion to my colleague, Ms. Aisha Ilyas.
Thank you, Mariam, and congratulations to you, Khansa and Danish, for conducting this study on a topic so little explored and so often neglected. And hats off to you and your team for personally visiting and interviewing these women in those difficult and far-off areas. I would request Ms. Maria Ross for her remarks on the topic now, on the report.
Yes, thank you very much. I believe that my colleague Rana is going to talk before me, but I think because we come from the same team and work on Pakistan issues together from different perspectives, it doesn't really matter. I wish to thank the speakers before me because the information that you have provided, representation of research, really gives a valuable and informative presentation, and also helps us put the wider context and this discourse on migration induced by climate in the context of Pakistan. A lot of what I will be saying today is not just my personal opinion or my personal views, but is something that we as a regional coordination office for Silk Routes in ICMPD in Vienna have contemplated as our future best contribution to these issues. And to addressing climate-induced migration and related issues in Pakistan and in the Silk Routes region in general. So you will be probably hearing also some of the repetitions of the things that we raised at other events we had that were focusing on climate-induced migration in South Asia. And most notably, I think the recent one was the Budapest process meeting on the topic, where some of you have been in attendance as well. The research that was presented today, and I really want to thank for a thorough and engaging and very interesting presentation. It was conducted as a part of a project, regional project titled the South Asia Migration and Climate, implemented in 3 countries, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. And in Pakistan in particular, our implementing partner was SDPI. It was implemented under the EU-funded project called Improving Migration Management in Silk Road Countries that ICMPD is in charge of implementing and managing. Yes, I think I said enough about the project. The component under which the SDPI project was funded is called the Silk Routes Facility, and it was awarded through a call for proposals mechanism. From our perspective, it's been a very good partnership, a strong partnership. We have a lot of positive findings together, and we certainly hope that in the future we will build together on the results delivered, even though there is no immediate follow-up agreed on it. This project has helped us generate important information from the grassroots level, from the climate migrant hotspots, and you have heard about the findings from the 2 hotspots that SDPI has conducted, and helped us paint a multi-level picture of where the gaps are and what needs to be filled in order for the climate-induced migration to be properly recognized by national migration policies, and also to be given adequate priority and attention in the implementation of these policies. And as an international organization focusing primarily on development of migration policies, this is where our focus are, and this is where we think we could contribute best. We are particularly content that with the fact that the research, analysis, and development of recommendations for future actions has paid due attention to the situation of women and of children and to their specific vulnerabilities. Whether or not it acts as a migration push factor in concrete sets of circumstances, climate change disrupts traditional livelihoods, and impacts of these disruptions are not felt equally across women and men, boys and girls. Overall, there is a considerable focus on the men who migrate, but women and girls who migrate or who are left behind are absent from the conversation. And this is a particular added value of this research. In some countries, climate-induced migration is already included in migration relevant policies. This may not be the case everywhere, and where this is not the case, we will continue to advocate for the inclusion of this topic, and will continue to provide technical assistance for development of the focus policies. And the objective is for the relevant policies and strategies to establish a clear link between climate change and migration, with focus on migration resulting from the long-term effects of climate change, and not only on displacement as a result of a natural disaster. Not saying that the second one is not relevant, it is very much relevant, but there is also a need for a focus on the first one as well, meaning migration resulting from the long-term effects of climate change. There is an identified need for continued capacity building into a levels of governance, and this we have heard today in previous presentation as well. And we need to help develop possible strategies and tools to deal with the effects of climate on migration. Good understanding of the matter and exposure of different governance levels to comparative experiences in addressing climate-induced migration in similar contexts will lead to definition of better policies, better policy responses, better targeted services, and similar. But for this, we first need knowledge, and knowledge is what we get from research. And in our discussions on climate and climate-induced migration so far in the region concerned, the lack of knowledge and lack of data was the primary concern. So we are very happy that with this research we have contributed to filling this gap a bit, and we hope that this we will continue to work to ensure that this information fits into the development into policy development processes and also in policy implementation processes. Now, the policy development and capacity building are never separated, and they need to be coupled also with awareness raising among affected communities. And this was also raised today at a couple of points. Communities need stronger awareness of the impact of climate. They also need to understand what are the future projections in this regard so that then they can make timely decisions. And climate change mitigation and adaptation measures need to be tailored to the context of specific communities. Communities also need education on environmental sustainability and community-based resource management as a way of preserving and managing natural resources. The ways climate-induced migration affects women and other vulnerable groups need special consideration in all of the potential interventions considered above, and should be reflected throughout. South Asia and Pakistan within South Asia is one of the most vulnerable and disaster-prone regions and at a high risk of climate change and associated impacts. And despite this known fact, there was not enough information, and there is still not enough information on migration and the resulted sufferings of the communities who are forced to migrate. Within the Silk Routes Regional Coordination Office of the ICMPD, we will take this as one of the priority areas for our programs in the future, and we will continue to support our partners in government, in civil society, and in communities to define and implement responses that will address the needs and identified vulnerabilities. I thank you for inviting me to talk to you and with you today, and also for a very, very strong presentation that you have delivered previously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. We are grateful for the thoughtful participation and support in identifying the problems of our vulnerable communities, particularly women, which they are facing due to climate change migrations. I'd now take Ms. Rana Rahim, Head ICMPD Pakistan's comments on the report.
Thank you very much. And thank you also for inviting me to the launch of the report on climate-induced migration. I'm very pleased to be here. And also, as Maria pointed out, the collaboration with SDPI has been very positive, and I'm honored to have collaborated with SDPI on this. I think Mr. Soleri mentioned that this report was also presented to parliamentarians, and one of the objectives of this intervention was to raise awareness about the policymakers on the extent of climate-induced migration affecting Pakistan, and highlight the hardships vulnerable communities face when displaced as a result of natural disasters. So this is really encouraging to know. As Maria has pointed out, ICMPD has been contributing to the development of mechanisms and frameworks to govern migration in the context of environmental change. And in the Budapest process, which once again Maria mentioned, the environmental drivers of migration and ways to address them through international cooperation is one of the priority areas of this dialogue. And this particular dialogue, the Budapest process, is something that ICMPD serves as a secretariat for. It brings together 53 countries, countries of origin, transit, and destination together, as well as several international organizations to discuss migration-related issues. And as my colleague pointed out, efforts are made to translate the political commitments and the priorities identified by this through this dialogue into concrete actions on the ground. Also, we're very pleased that Pakistan is an active member of this forum. So in addition to that, as you know, ICMPD has collaborated with SDPI on this, and this study conducted in Tharparkar and Muzaffargarh, the presentation is not only comprehensive, the study, its findings are not only comprehensive, but also quite valuable. And we feel that this is something that we can build on in the future. It would definitely contribute significantly to a more nuanced understanding of this issue. The findings of this study show that both the process and the outcome of climate-induced migration are highly gendered. We know from this report that the negative impacts of climate change are uneven. They're disproportionately impacting poorer and more vulnerable communities, particularly women and girls. And mainly because on average, women, particularly in these districts, tend to be poorer, less educated, they have a lower health status, and as was pointed out in the presentation, limited access to or ownership of natural resources. And many women in this particular study have identified a lack of safe shelters, security, and inadequate emergency relief as key concerns. And we hope that through sharing and raising awareness on these issues, policy and decision makers will be able to take a better approach towards building the adaptation capacities and the resilience of these communities. There's also, as was pointed out in the presentation, women and girls displaced as a result of environmental disasters are often at a greater risk of sexual and gender-based violence. There are issues related to the safety of women, their health status, given the disintegration of their social networks, as well as a lack of access to basic necessities such as food and water were mentioned, and in extreme sort of circumstances, which suggests, and the study itself found, that women suffer from psychosocial impacts of these natural disasters to a greater degree compared to men, given that they have this additional burden of looking after their family members, even when they themselves are in great distress. As a result, many women suffer from anxiety and post-traumatic stress, which again suggests that they will need some kind of assistance and psychosocial support. We also heard about pregnant women who suffer tragic losses due to the lack of timely and adequate emergency relief and health services, lack of transport, for example. So it is clear from this report that the experiences, needs, and priorities of climate migrants will vary by gender. And these differences have to be and should be accounted for if policies are to be inclusive. And in thinking about the vulnerability to climate-induced migration in countries such as Pakistan, the findings of the study are very important. We hope that it will pave the way for additional research with a focus on women as being one of the most vulnerable groups. I would like to very briefly also speak about the international dimension of climate-induced migration. We know that the relationship between climate change and migration is far more complex than just the common assumption that an increase in environmental disasters is likely to trigger large-scale movements of people across international borders. While there's little doubt that before or after the onset of an environmental disaster, large numbers are commonly displaced, studies have shown that in most cases, this displacement is usually temporary, and most people return to reestablish their lives and rebuild their pre-disaster homes. Studies have also shown that those who do migrate, the majority moves short distances, Some may move further from rural to urban areas, as was pointed out in the study, which again does not support the expectation of large movements of people across international borders. Nonetheless, there's a need for international recognition of the large-scale displacement caused by climate change and natural disasters, and a better understanding of its dimensions and a willingness within the international community to tackle it. The current system of international law is not equipped to protect climate migrants, as there are no legally binding agreements requiring countries to support climate migrants. While climate migrants who flee these unbearable conditions resemble refugees, and what we've heard in the report is particularly concerning, but the legal protections provided to refugees do not extend to climate migrants. And Mr. Soleri mentioned the definitions, and at this point, they're often referred to or designated as environmental migrants and do not have the same legal protection that, say, refugees do. But as their numbers grow, it's going to become very difficult for the international community to ignore this kind of a challenge. And the positive thing is that within the international community, there is a realization and a desire to find out more and to see how these issues can be addressed. I would just like to very quickly refer to a recent study that was undertaken by ICMPD for the EU Parliament, which examined the nexus between climate change and migration. Migration as a strategy to cope with climate change was also explored. And this report concludes with recommendations for the European Parliament. And I'll just mention a couple of the recommendations that I believe are relevant here. The report recommends the development of a coherent policy to address migration in the context of climate change. It suggests strengthening assistance to countries particularly affected by environmental disasters. It also recommends promoting the development of tools and policies in areas of the world most affected by these events, including through technical and financial assistance. And it also recommends that the EU Parliament push for forward-looking EU asylum and migration policies, which take into account climate change and natural disasters. So as severe climate change displaces more people, the international community may be forced to either redefine refugees to include climate migrants or create a legal category and accompanying institutional framework to protect climate migrants. In the meantime, I hope that we can continue to develop our understanding of climate-induced migration through research such as the one conducted by SDPI, and we look forward to working with SDPI in the future as well. Thank you very much. Stop there.
Thank you, Ms. Rana, for sharing your learnings on the topic. Without any further delays, I'd move towards Mr. Sanjay Vashis, Director, Climate Action Network. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Aisha. And thanks for wonderful research. Can I share my slides, if possible?
Yes, sure. Adnan, please give him access.
Thank you. I think a lot more has been already said about it, and it has been an honor for CAN South Asia to be part of this research. This partnership with SDPI, ICMPD has certainly built a program within region. I'll speak more about what is the situation on ground in terms of our neighborhood. Well, of course, there is Pakistan, but then there is a neighborhood also. I just answered an online query also that, you know, when there is a fire in the house, it's either the people who stay in that house or the neighborhood. That's the first response, and that is why we have to look at this problem from that perspective. So basically, same work has also been carried out. In fact, for cancer, it's a 6-country program, all India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Afghanistan, and regional work also. And we are pursuing to the next level also. But if you look at South Asia in terms of development challenges, it's around 1.7 billion people living in the region already facing higher temperatures. We all face that, of course. This is the summer going on, most extreme. And summer is very extreme. Now the monsoon is going to be very extreme. We have seen cyclonic activities in Arabian Sea, Nisarga, this time that hit India's western coast, and I think even it touched Pakistan coast also. Natural disasters has forced almost over 18 million people out of their homes in 135 countries, out of which 1.3 million people are displaced in India only. And let me tell you, in some of the projections that we did as for our regional report, our assessment is that if the way we are, we are mitigating greenhouse gases globally, or the way we are implementing adaptation or making effort to build resilience, we are looking at almost around 62 million people going to be displaced by 2050 in South Asia. That's the gravity of situation we are looking at, and we can't handle it. In fact, 11 million people were displaced in 2010 when Pakistan's industry were flooded, and I think 1.1 million households were damaged. And that's the severity. It hits us so badly. Bangladesh is no different. 1 meter rise in sea level will inundate some 13% of landmass in Bangladesh, displacing 50 to 20 million. So even if we integrate or total all these displacement projections, we are looking at around 62 million people being displaced by 2050. Out of 1.7 billion people, almost 700 million people are those in South Asia who has been affected from climate change disasters in one way or other so far, and which is not exactly half of the population, but little bit less than half the population. And what are the impacts of climate change? Severe impact on agriculture, water resources, ecosystems, food security, health, and energy production. And these are the basis of life in any country. If you look at threatened food security or water security is no good. Ecosystems is the foundation of life, sustainable life. And of course, health is any challenge to health to the communities is a big challenge in terms of sustainable development objectives also. To complete a complete change to the environment and current ecosystem with higher warming, poverty and vulnerability increase through decline in agricultural productivity. These are slow onset impact which is going on, which I normally, when I try to explain it, I normally say it's like slow poison effect. Which is there. Agriculture yield is reducing per unit area. More conflict over access to natural resources because natural resources are the natural social security system nature has provided, but over exploitation is always a danger here. Status quo, climate projections for South Asia foresee higher number of climate-induced displacement migration. It will continue to happen. So we have to act as source or destination. I heard from Danish some recommendations also about livelihood. Yes, at source, we have to make sure that livelihood is strengthened. I'll come on the recommendations later on. Migration is still perceived as part of development, ignoring the change trends and impacts of environmental degradation. And that's the challenge we found in most of the countries when we speak about, we ask them about migration. They say, well, migration has been going on for ages. It's been many centuries that migration is going on. So what's new about it? But that migration used to be for better growth, better opportunities, for higher income. But now migration is under distress. So we have to differentiate between migration, which is under distress, under pressure. If I stay at a coastal area, I don't want to leave. I'm staying here, but I'm forced to leave is a distress migration. And so certainly we have to differentiate and we have to act on that. There is a limited national attention to climate change displacement and migration compared with other issues. And that's a big challenge because as of now, migration is seen as a very normal thing to happen. But distress migration has not been on the radar of policymakers yet. all countries. In Pakistan, Afghanistan, but yes, also in India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Climate change-related displacement migration is not sufficiently recognized, and that's a challenge. I heard from Rana Rahimji about the definition that we need to have clarity on. Yes, we have that gap as well, and that need to be worked on, and all countries need to recognize those definitions, technical definitions, which would ensure that legal or social protections, legal protections especially, can be framed in South Asia. The most vulnerable communities migrate mostly when pushed towards destinations, towards the area where they think that they will be able to survive. Trapped population want to migrate but have no resources to do so, and women and children are one stakeholder of trapped population. If you look at the impact of migration displacement on women and children, they are trapped population. Even if they want to migrate, they cannot. Women and children particularly vulnerable to climate migration displacement. They rarely migrate on their own. Most are left behind when men migrate in search of food and income. We heard similar situation in the case studies presented by Mariam. And yes, it's same in all countries. Increase unpaid care work burden on women, household chores, plus agriculture work, plus taking care of children. In fact, in Nepal, we also found that slowly feminization of agriculture sector is happening. They don't have land rights, legal rights, but there's a lot more women who are working there. When there was earthquake in 2015 in Nepal, the immediate response was from women, because most of the men has already migrated in the remote districts. So so feminization of agriculture has been found there. Limited communication, irregular remittances received from the men who have migrated, highly uncertainty of paying bills, and that's a big challenge. Increased child marriage to receive dowry or get rid of girl child early. We heard it from Mariam. Trauma and depression. Mariam, you already mentioned about depression. One case of a woman losing 7 months of pregnancy, and depression hit her. So depression resulting from loss of family members, home and livelihood due to flooding or drought. What are some of the people's solution is, of course, we need to manage water resources in a more participatory manner for flood and drought management. And of course, we need to harvest water at situ. Livelihoods, diversification and skill trainings is important. Training in agroecological farming approaches and methods. And so, as I said, it's livelihoods at source that need to be diversified, that need to be strengthened, and wherever they get the jobs, any kind of job, when they move to a destination, they should be able to get some kind of rights in terms of per day money they earn, in terms of protection, etc. So those measures are required. I'm referring to labor laws that are required, especially when they move to urban areas also. Education for girls and boys, access to school and children and teacher is important, because education for girls and boys would mean that they will become asset to the family. That would discourage early child marriages, and also ensure that they become asset when there are more earning members in the family. Provision of basic services and facilities, including health and clinic, needs to be there, in creation of job opportunities for existing skills or provision of new skill trainings. Regionally, we certainly need to act. I keep hearing from everyone, SARC is defunct, nothing is happening, we cannot do anything about it. In my opinion, regional cooperation is important. We cannot keep fighting when a house is on fire. Certainly, we need a more prominent role of SARC in actually addressing this problem. Even if we start with the coordination between countries on that, I think that would be a very good start. Strengthen regional cooperation initiatives, including SAKEP, which has an office in Sri Lanka, and ISIMOD, looking at environmental aspects also. Consider model of regional cooperation between Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. One of the reference why we thought Central Asia, because ICMPD's area of project countries are these. But then another example is also ASEAN, how ASEAN in Southeast Asia has a regional cooperation. They talk to each other. They try to find common solutions. Regional fora should develop, agree, and implement on common policies, codes, and responses. Codes and responses and common policies are important. For example, now when we are working on vaccination against COVID, and there is a discussion about vaccination passport, all countries are coordinating with each other on what kind of people we will allow to enter in our country if they are vaccinated with certain which kind of vaccines. So certainly there is a coordination going on, and that kind of common policies and codes and responses would certainly help. My last slide, share data collection, analysis of climate change and population movement across border. Very sensitive information. I understand that, but important to do that because this issue is going to become very crucial in coming years, especially in order to diffuse any kind of conflict situation in future. Cooperate and support must be scaled up to avert, minimize, and address. When I said about sharing information with each other and coordinating, that means avert and minimize and address accordingly. International media should be broadened the coverage of displacement in South Asia to include climate-induced displacement, not just displacement resulting from conflict, and in order to increase global awareness of the issue. International donors should increase funding commitments to government for enhanced social protection. Certainly, as Can South Asia, we are gearing now, as I speak, within this month. So we had a call with SDPI also on all the research, what we have done. And I would like to draw attention of Honorable Minister of State for that. We would certainly like to hand over to you, ma'am, the work that we have done. And we do hope that through our, I will not call it advocacy, but I would certainly like to call it a partnership. Through our partnership of civil society and government, we do hope in coming year a good policy response is framed based on the research that we have done. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. Sanjay's contribution on the topic is always so well crafted and well sought out. We have Ms. Zirtaj Gul Wazir with us. Zirtaj Gul Wazir is the State Minister for Climate Change. And if I'm not wrong, her constituency is actually geographically very close to Muzaffargarh, one of our area of research here. But before I take her on board, I'd request Dr. Abid to formally welcome her at the forum. Dr. Abid, your mic is mute.
Thank you. Let me warmly welcome Minister of State, Mr. Taj Gul, for sparing her valuable time and joining us, especially on this very important subject. And I must acknowledge here that Mr. Taj Gul has always been very receptive of STPI's policy recommendation, and even once we had conducted this fieldwork, and Mariam Abbasi, she gave her the presentation of some of the results. So thanks, ma'am, for your patronization and for your belief in evidence-based policy making.
Should I start now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Mariam, and thank you, Hassan, and all of the participants here, especially the STPI, Abid Sulari Saab. It's my honor to be here. Just for the record, we have a budget session going on, and anytime Prime Minister Imran Khan can address the House, and I will run back there. So it's just that sometime I got in between my chamber, because Mariam knows that when she started this discussion with the STPI on climate-induced migration, I was the one who was really interested, because at least this climate-induced migration policy making or discussion has started in Pakistan. I welcome it because it's my real concern, and it's really close to my heart, because your co-study, which actually consists of the two districts, one is the Muzaffargarh and the other one is Tharparkar. The Muzaffargarh is a part of Dera Ghazi Khan division, and I'm the only elected lady who won from Dera Ghazi Khan. and I worked very close with the flood affectees in 2010 in Dera Ghazi Khan, near Ghazi Ghat, all of the roads and highways, where I could meet all of the families and women there. So my comments or my introduction is not that I read things, it's my own personal experience with the ladies, what they went through in this flood affectees. So I think my perception is that climate change is not a gender neutral phenomena. It affects more the vulnerable societies, children, old, women especially, and special people, and all of the people who are marginalized. So, and I see a very lag between there's a gender gap in the national policies and the climate change. Climate change discussion has started very effectively in Pakistan in the last 3 years. And it makes me very proud about this portfolio that in 3 years, we have worked a lot on the climate change in Pakistan, since we are one of the most affected countries by the climate change. So when we, on the 5th June, when we had this honor to host and organize the World Environment Day, in my inaugural speech, I suggested Prime Minister Imran Khan myself that the upcoming 2 proposals that we should work. One was actually the youth involvement in Pakistan in a climate change policy, and another was that we should work on a climate-induced migration. And Pakistan and Prime Minister Imran Khan should be the first leader to make or to give a table or to give a platform to all of the South Asian countries and to talk about the climate-induced migration, and especially about the vulnerable society. And I'm talking about the women here. So in 2010, when it started, I used to go to Ghazi Ghat, where all of the effectors of the Muzaffargarh were all there. Some were having tents, some were having, they were all vulnerable there. So I used to go with my team every day there to give them some relief, food bags and things. So what I observed there, that yes, global warming has started, and it has started affecting all of the countries, especially Pakistan. And unfortunately, Pakistan has no part into this global warming. But we are not only affected by its impact, but our daily life and our personalities, our set of mind, and everything is actually, and even our total family is affected by this climate change. And we have to understand those countries who are the reason of the global warming, and due to them, the climate changes are there, and we have all this disaster coming in Pakistan and even in the South Asia. We have to make them understand that due to their, this effects on the climate change, Pakistan is affected by those, and our family are actually, and our women are, and our vulnerable groups are really affected by them. So we have to make them understand that we need a help, because climate change is a really big phenomenon. Pakistan cannot help itself. So when I used to go to this women, after 3 to 4 days, I started realizing some, faces, and I came to know, I started due to their conversation, and I started to know their names and families, and they sort of, the girls and ladies became my friend. So one day, I always tell the story. So one day I went there, and there was a group of girls who said to me that you're a girl and we want to talk to you on a, in a private. It made me very scared, because I did not know what were they expecting from me, or what were they talking. I did not know that before that. So I thought they might be asking for a very big help, which I would not be able to give them. So it made me scared too. So when I went there on the side, so there were a group of girls, they told me, there were some girls and families, the girls were in the adolescence age, and then there were girls who were newly married, and then there were girls who were pregnant and were having babies at that time. So this is that government is there, and there are very good people in the society who comes up with the food bags. We have a lots of foods. And we have a good drinking water facility, because there a tanker full of water or clean drinking water comes and gives us water. But we have one issue, and we want to discuss it with you, that we have lots of personal needs and we can't talk to anyone, and we are here on the roads and we do not understand to whom we should tell our stories. So there I realized, what they were actually went through. So then I went again to my friends, to my group of people, and we started gathering those personal things which they actually required. And there, from there, I realized that women and their stories and their effects by the climate change are different than the men. They have to protect their family. They have to protect their honor. They have to protect their persona and personality, but yet they have to come with such needs which they cannot tell their stories to. So then I started giving these things, and there on the climate day, I asked Prime Minister, and when Mariam twice called me on this climate-induced migration, so it really touched my heart, and I thought that as a climate change minister, yes, we really need to work about this thing. And the other story is about the cotton bales in south of the Punjab. Usually in South Punjab, it's agriculture society, but men are doing all of the work and women are doing the household work. But then there is a 6-month time in Dera Ghazi Khan and the whole South Punjab where women earn their own money, when they feel empowered. Because in my personal capacity, there's no women empowerment without education and without economic conditions. You have your own money, you're more empowered. So the cotton bale, when they collect all these women, they get their own money in that year, which they do not have to ask to their husband or father or any elder men in their family. So it's their own money which they collect. So the climate change, our cotton bill has, because our climatic changes, weathers are different, our weathers are different, our rainfalls are different, climatic changes are there. So our crops cannot stand those extreme weathers. It has affected the cotton in Pakistan, but the most effect which I know it has affected our import and everything, and even export and textile. But the most it has affected it actually women in South Punjab, because they are deprived of their own personal money, which they used to have in the whole year. So two factors. One is this flood, which is women are more vulnerable there, and their personal needs are different from the men. And the second one is that they, being an agriculture country, it has really affected the capacity of women where they could collect their own money in the season. I've read all of the STPI work and all of the recommendation they actually gave on the national and international level. Some of them I really liked. I like to talk about them. The one is that there is a need to demonstrate the link between the national policies in regard of the scope of the national climate change policy needs to extend to climate-induced migration and related issues. I think my first work should be after this STPI, a climate-induced migration report. I should be the one to initiate that to extend actually the climate change policy of 2012 and to put this climate-induced migration as a part of the national climate change policy of Pakistan under my ministry, and it should especially address the issue of the women and all of the vulnerable groups. This I recommend, and this I'll reinforce in my climate change ministry. This I promise. And on the STPI, on any national level or international level, you will see that it has become part of the climate change policy. This I promise. Then another one which I see is that another bullet point is, in view of the complaints of women harassment, the government should devise a long-term strategy for their protection during disasters. The laws are in place, mechanism to implement this law is required. I fully endorse this one, in the climate-induced policy under the climate change, I recommend that we should work with our provincial and district level, with all of the law enforcement agency. There should be some point with that any disaster struck, those laws should revoke or should be working, especially with the women harassment and when they are displaced or struck by any climate change. So this one I will work on, inshallah. And the third one is that areas prone to flooding in the Punjab should be declared non-residential area, and communities should not be allowed to settle along Indus River. For that purpose, communities should be provided with the land ownership to build their house at the safer place. I think it's a very valid point by the STPI. I think it's a very valid point, and the people in the communities and family which I'm referring in 2010, affected by the flood, which was a super flood by the UN. This is the same area of Ghazi Ghat, actually, which I'm talking. On the river basin or near the Indus River, there are families who build their houses there. When suddenly the floods are there, they have no place to go. So on this, I promise to work with the Punjab government and to provide a shelter. I know it's very difficult to restrain people not to live there, and because there are land issues, and then there are housing issues, settlement issues, but still I think I will be able to work on this point. And then there is another one in the regional and international one. The regional, which I already proposed to Prime Minister Imran Khan, and he really took it seriously, that on the South Asia, Pakistan should be the first one to introduce a platform to a climate-induced migration of South Asia. Pakistan should take a lead, because Pakistan is one of those countries too. Pakistan should take a lead, and we should build some platform to connect all of the South Asian countries who are affected by this all climate-induced migration. And on the international institution, I think I already said on this platform that climate change is a very huge phenomena. It's larger than life. One country or one set of community cannot deal with it, cannot cope with it. And especially Pakistan needs help for that. I think after the South Asia connectivity on the climate-induced migration and on the climate change, I think that recommendation should go to the UNEP or to the any international authorized institution, organization, which should work on the women which are affected by the climate change. We should bring a platform, or we should bring some help for the capacity building, or for the health, for the mental health, and for the vulnerability of the women by the climate change. So I hope that all of this, because I've not heard to the other participants who were here, because I said that Prime Minister Imran Khan is going to come. In fact, he said I can watch him on the TV. He said he just came to the parliament and I should be there. I have not heard to the other participants, but I would look forward that Mariam should give all this recommendation on the STPI climate-induced women migration of Pakistan and share it with the provinces too, because we have layers of governments and different political parties are working in the provinces. So wherever my federal government or wherever my minister is needed, I'll sit there and we will work on the climate-induced migration. And I think we should take the lead. And as a woman minister, I think two things I like to tell. One, that I work with the energy efficient stove program, that is especially for the women. I've started another one that we started with a 10 billion tsunami. 15% of the nurseries and employment is given to the women in Pakistan for the entrepreneurship. And the third one, which is in a starting, but we need to work on more on this side. That is, the climate change ministry has for the first time exercised its another commitment on the international level. That is the Mercury Minamata Convention, which is another very close subject to my heart. because I think that we are very proud Asian people on our language, color, and identity. We like that we should have a beautiful skin, but not at the expense of our health and complex that this Minamata Convention should address, that the excessive use of mercury should not destroy our personality and skin. So it's in a very initial state, but we have ratified this by our cabinet, and we are looking forward to work in it. So I thank you, all of the participants and everyone who has put their efforts into this climate-induced migration, especially working for the women and the women migrants in Pakistan and the vulnerable sects of South Asia and Pakistan especially. And both of the districts, especially one is mine, that is Muzaffargarh, near to me. I'll be available every time for your platform, for your policies and the implementation of it. I thank you everyone for listening to me. It's my honor to talk on this platform. Dr. Abdul Salari Saab, Mariam, Aisha. I always appreciate the work of STPI, and it's a very heart-touching topic. It's a policy. Let's proceed it with a very good effort and to bring some help to our women. Thank you.
Thank you, Zulfqar, for joining us despite your busy schedule. If you would stay for a quick photograph, I'd request everyone to turn on their cameras, all our panelists, for a photograph. I would request Mariam for closing remarks now.
Thank you, Aisha. And I know that everyone was here throughout. And they were very attentive and were hearing our panelists and our discussion, and some of the attendees also asked really good questions, not only on our Facebook Live, but also here in the chat box, which we have answered. And I just have to say thank you very much to our esteemed panelists for contributing to the very good discussion. And thank you so much to the attendees who participated online at our social media and who joined here after registering at our Zoom link as well. This report would be uploaded on our website soon, and we will share its link on our Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram account. Thank you so much for joining us today.